We're going to go ahead and begin our Charlotte City Council meeting for the day. This portion of our meeting is considered one of the areas that we have for the opportunity to have discussions, hear updates and reports, and ask questions that are necessary around some of the items that the staff has been working on and prepared for. But before we begin that substantive portion of our meeting, first I'd like to have introductions, and we'd start with our city attorney.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
City Council District 3.
Ed Drace, District 7.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Bylaws Mayor.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Lawana Mayfield, Council Member at Large.
Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Billy Tons, Deputy City Clerk.
All right, thank you, everyone. When we start this meeting, we are beginning this segment of our meeting, and we're going to start with the mayor and council actions on the consent agenda, the questions. Ms. Harris, I believe everyone should have at their place questions that have been addressed on these items that would go items 32 through 58, but we do have several items that have been removed from the agenda. If I can find that, Madam Clerk.
Yes, ma'am. That would be 50, 53, and 54, all property transactions.
And those would not be, the staff is asked to have those removed, 53, 54,
And 50.
and 50. All right. And now, before you, Ms. Harris has prepared the questions from the consent agenda before you. So let me start out with the question. Are there any items that council would like to have comments? And I know that I have one for a separate vote for 33. And is there any other comment or request for a separate vote? Ms. Mayfield?
Number 39, Mayor.
39, which is easement clearing services. There's also a document in front of us regarding that service. Any other questions, any other items for a separate vote? Any items for comment? Hearing none for comment, may I have a motion for approval of the consent items with the following exceptions: 33, 39, 50, 53, and 54?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
My apologies. I was trying to get your attention. For comment, item number 35, the
Okay.
cooperative purchasing contract for Speed Cushion Materials.
All right, 35 for comment.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right.
The others
do
move to approve.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, before that, I want to recognize Councilmember Mayfield for a comment on item 35.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The item 35, the cooperative purchasing contract for speed cushion materials, we're asked tonight to approve a $350,000 contract amount. These are for the speed cushion devices that are installed on the street to reduce passenger car speeds without interfering with the passage of larger emergency response vehicles. My question initially was regarding, have we identified what areas of town these speed cushions will be allocated to? Or if we're just approving an amount, this $350,000 amount, thank you, Ms. Harris, will purchase approximately 85 devices. But we don't, it would be helpful if it was already identified the areas versus we know up to 85 devices can be purchased out of the 350,000. So potentially communities will, I guess, submit a request to council and go through the process. And it's for areas that have less than 3,000 vehicles per day. But I just wanted to get some clarification on identifying locations versus just approving an amount that will potentially purchase up to 85 other devices without clearly knowing if we have a targeted area, whether it's in our opportunity zones or some of our specific neighborhoods that we're looking to install these speed cushions.
Yes, ma'am, and you're correct. We don't have the current specific locations all pinpointed yet, but we're working with neighborhoods and our Vision Zero programs and traffic data to determine exactly where these would go. And just to clarify too, the 350 is just an estimate given based on our typical project load. So we're just trying to give you a idea of the magnitude of the spend, but it could be more, it could be less.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we've had the comment. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. All right, is there anyone opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. So the next item that we have is the police firearm ammunition, item 33, to approve the unit price contract for the purchase of firearm ammunition for sole source exemption, authorizing the manager to negotiate and renew the contract. Do I have a motion in favor of the action?
So moved.
And a second? All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. The motion is to approve item 33, approving a unit price contract for the purchase of police firearm ammunition, as well as authorize the manager to negotiate and execute a contract with Kistler Police Supply for the purchase, and authorize the manager to renew the contracts as needed. These are required. We must have ammunition for certification at the state level. So we need, I know that we are going to be absent 2 council members today. We can do this again, but if we could have a motion, we have a motion in favor. Can we do Mr. McCary? Yes.
I just a question, do we have everyone that's going to be here tonight at this point?
At least within my knowledge, we still have other people, 2 additional people coming in. So,
Well, it's just, I mean, this is not, I don't know what's going on with this one, but this is something where it's, you know, it's not just requirements at a state level of what we have to do. Like they have required training to go shoot at ranges to make sure
All
they're
of that.
proficient at what they're doing. This seems highly unusual that we would be doing this right now, and I hope.
all right, so why don't we go ahead, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, motion passes. Thank you. The next item that was requested, oh, that's right, those opposed. All right, Mayor Pro Tem is opposed. Thank you. All right, the next item is item 36. traffic signal installation and maintenance to approve a 3-year contract in the amount of $9,195,000 to the lowest responsive bidder, ALS of North Carolina, for unspecified traffic signal installation and maintenance. Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? A second. Is there any discussion? Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This was another one that I asked Ms. Harris to pull for me. My question on this was information. I wanted additional information regarding the other two companies to see if they exceeded or had met the minority participation goals, because I have a challenge with the fact that this particular company not only failed to meet the established SBE goals. I also had a conversation earlier today with Mr. Coker and staff to find out about those good faith efforts, and if we have a process in place where if a prime has stated that they are not able to meet or exceed the goals, are we verifying the good faith efforts by actually contacting the minority or SBE businesses that should have been contacted by that prime? Ms. Harris did provide information regarding the third lowest bidder. Their bid was about $2.5 million more than the bid that we're accepting, yet they did meet a lot of our participation goals, and I wanted to give a chance for Mr. Coker to get in if he needed to comment. So my question, excuse me, is really for staff. When we're looking at contracts, if staff has identified a minimum participation of only 3% or a minimum participation of only 5%, and yet a company still cannot meet those minimums, when we've already identified that there are MBE or SBE companies out there, why would we move forward with that particular contract when this council has approved our equity framework? And I think Mr. Coker did have some comments for this particular action. We're talking about the traffic signal installation, excuse me, and maintenance, item 36, as to why this particular company, the GFE efforts, were able to allow them when they've only committed 2.78% participation, and the established goal was only 6%.
All right, Mr. Coker, can you address the question from Councilmember Mayfield?
I can, and good evening, leadership. Relative to item 36, this particular contract was put out, I believe, early December. There were few bidders available to bid on it. It went back. There were 3 bidders, the first 2 of which did not meet the goals. The third bidder did meet the goals, but they were $2.5 million more than the first bidder. And per policy, we are able to waive the GFEs in instances such as this, and that was the reasoning behind the decision.
So for future reference, and this will be really for Manager Jones, I would love for council to be able to receive an update on how and when that waiving comes into place. And also, Mr. Coker, can you please let me know that $2.5 million, in comparison for the total cost of almost $10 million for this project, would that additional 2.5, had we gone with the company that hit our equity-related goals, would that have caused a delay or a non-start for this project?
It would have, in fact, caused a delay, and it exceeded the budget available to do the work.
So we did have an identified budget, and for this particular. So even though I will not be supporting this tonight, my colleagues very well may, it will be helpful moving forward if we have established and supported an equity goal, and if there are minimums that are presented by CBI, if a company is not meeting those minimums, we really need to look at what our GFE scoring is to ensure that those goals are being met. And if they're not, that we truly are holding that prime accountable to do everything that they can to identify a SBE or MBE to partner with. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right,
I'll take
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Ms. Watlington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question for Councilmember Mayfield. Can you expound a little bit upon your reason to not support this particular one?
Because the minimum goals for SBE participation was 6%, and this particular company is coming at 2.78. And the established MBE goal was only 3%, of which they have 0.
And I'm hearing from you that the qualified firm that would have met this was way over the budget of what was available for this project?
The third place firm that met the goals was $2.5 million more.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And Mayor, if I may, there's a opportunity in there, whether it was doing a follow-up on our end before. The biggest question I asked Mr. Coker was, if we're going to use the GFE, is there a process in place today where staff follows up with the MBEs and the SBEs that were identified that said they were contacted and were not able to do the job? Are we just creating a true checks and balances before it makes its way to us? Because yes, 2.5 million is a lot. In the scheme of a $10 million project, would that additional 2.5 or could there have been a negotiation in that 2.5 to have better participation? That would be helpful to know.
That's a great question, and we can talk about this offline. It's more general question, but I'm wondering, what I'm accustomed to is that after the bid is awarded, there's still a negotiation in terms of pricing. So I'm curious as to how we execute that, but I can learn about that offline.
Yeah, I think the purchasing process is something that we all need to be aware of, and creating that fairness. And that's one of the things. But, you know, and I see this as an opportunity as, when we talk about business development, why isn't there an African-American firm ready to do this work? I mean, streets are going to be striped a lot. And so what we ought to be thinking about is, how do we find a place for someone to learn this business and to get into this business? Because that's where you make money, because you become an owner versus someone that's just seeking partnerships in the process. So if you're watching us now and you would like to participate in the economy of the city for about $9 million, establish yourself as a traffic signal installation and maintenance company as a minority, and then we would be glad to work with you on those kinds of issues.
And Madam Mayor, just the last. My apologies. Madam Mayor, the last piece of that is the fact that we did establish companies. Our percentages that we established comes from the fact that there are companies that are in a position to do these roles. That's why I want to have more clarity on the GFE for these companies not to have been tapped. Is it because this is a long-term contract, so you're only going to pull people occasionally? What is the challenge where if we have a minimum participation, why is that not being met?
Right, I agree. I just think there's a lot of parking lots and a lot of streets that would be striped. So, all right, so we have had the comment and the discussion, and I believe we have a motion on the floor for approval of this item. So all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 1. All right. So that takes us through our consent agenda, and then with that, I'm going to turn it over to the manager for the action review agenda.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. We do have one item tonight for action review, and then we have a proposed closed session. In terms of the action review, it's somewhat of an update for our digital inclusion plan. What's very timely about this right now, before Assistant City Manager Askew makes it to the front, is that during your annual strategy meeting, you did add bridging the digital divide into one of your priorities. So this is a perfect time for Renee to give us an update of where we are and where we're headed.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager. With me today, we have Rachel Starks, who is our Smart Cities Program Manager, and Andrew Bowen, who a lot of you already know, who is our Data and Innovation Officer. And I will try to navigate and talk at the same time. And that didn't go well. Oh. Okay. Now, this may surprise you. I am the Chief Information Officer who could not navigate that slide.
We were just thinking that, Renee. We weren't going to say it.
And Assistant City Manager. So during the January Council Strategy Session, you identified digital inclusion as one of your strategic initiatives. And so today, I recognize that there are new council members, so the goal is to take you back to the work that's already been done in this space, and then also bring you forward to where we're going next with respect to this work. So here is just a blanket slide that actually shows a number of the activities that we've been working on in the categories. And so when you look at these categories, they align with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, who says that high-speed internet, digital literacy, internet-enabled devices, technical support, and then we've added a future connected Charlotte as some of those foundational items that are required for a smart and equitable city with respect to digital. So as we go through, I'll touch on a number of these things in more detail. So phase one of we call Access Charlotte is all about a solution that allowed us to enable our community to have access to internet in some of those areas that were more underserved, and then providing support as well as computer devices. So I'm going to talk about that area just a little bit, just to kind of remind you of what happened in phase one. So we kicked off phase one in November 2020, and as a pilot, just to learn a lot about what does it actually take for us to do this work. And so we ended that pilot in December 2022. But during that pilot, we were able to outfit more than 1,700 households with internet. We also had 4 public spaces, and we had community centers that we also lit up with Wi-Fi so that we made it possible for people to utilize the services. In addition to that, we partnered with a number of different areas and local partners. One happens to be CATS, who is an internal partner, and we stood up Wi-Fi in the buses, all our city buses, as well as the Gold Line has been stood up with internet. We also partnered with CMS and the library. So it was really important for us to recognize that it's not sufficient just to have access, but you also have access to services through 311 digital navigators. So if a resident had questions about internet, how do I get there, how do I access, how do I navigate, they can easily call 311 and they will be connected with a digital navigator program, a support arm for Access Charlotte. So when we talk about what I call is foundational, which is access in the home, devices in the hand, we can compare where we started in 2019 to where we are today based on census data in 2021. And as you can see, there's been progress. So back when we got started, there were approximately, according to census, 51,000 households, more than 51,000 households without a desktop or laptop. And so if you look at that number today, we're looking at 38,000 plus. So that is progress. The same thing applies when you're looking at high-speed internet. We started off with over 66,000, virtually 67,000 households that did not have access to a subscribed service of some kind. And that's been reduced by 16%. So we're making progress, and that is wonderful for us to talk about, but I know we're not done. The last column is really looking at some data that we've actually obtained from CMS. And there are approximately 71,000 students in the CMS system that qualify for the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is the internet service provided by the federal government. So there is still a whole lot of work that we still can do in this space. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So although we've talked about some of the movement and the path that we've taken as part of Phase 1, Phase 2 is how do we continue that? How do we broaden that perspective to cover more of the needs within Charlotte? So what I want to talk about here is how we plan on advancing this forward. So we talked about the pilot that occurred where we had Phase 1, we had about 1,700 plus households. And so we're looking much broader than that. And so now that we've gained learning from Phase 1, we now have a contract with Spectrum Charter, and we're going to be providing internet in the homes, direct connect to 7,900 households. And so the target completion for that is around about May timeframe to get all the households connected, and that includes all the households from Phase 1, plus the additional households totaling 7,900. So we're real excited about that. But what comes to mind is sustainability, because you, council, allocated $10 million to this work. And so part of that work is for direct connect internet, some of it's for learning, some of it workforce development. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. But about sustainability. So how do we sustain this model? And so converting our residents to the federally funded program, which is Affordable Connectivity Program, and get everyone moved over to that program where they can get internet for $30? Reduced to $30 per household. So that is huge. So you think about what you all pay, and someone that qualifies for the ACP program, and none of us qualify in this room, will be able to get that service for $35 a month. So that is tremendous. So our goal is, from sustainability, get you started today where we are, but then transition you to that program. So that's the goal. And then, of course, in that process, we're going to support community spaces by lighting up about 15 of those spaces. So again, we're trying to move to, if you're not at home, can you go into the community and get some of the same service? Okay, so ecosystem. I love the term ecosystem because none of us can do this work alone. And so we have partnered with agencies throughout the city that helps support the work that we're doing. One of those agencies is the Center for Digital Equity, and it is the Navigator program, and it is supported through Queen's University. And we help to fund training our own resources, our own residents within Charlotte to support their own. And so we have a group of residents that learn how to provide technical support over the phone to go out in the community and help our residents to get comfortable with using the internet. And so here are some additional partners that are in that ecosystem. And so you have the library, you have CMS, you have E2D, which is an organization that we also support. And what they do is they train young people to provide technical support, to build computers, to refurbish computers, and get them back into the community. And so a lot of what you see here is not just what we have done ourselves, but how we have worked alongside of a number of other organizations to accomplish the same work. And so we're real excited about just the fact that beyond just us, we have a whole ecosystem of partners that are working with us. Okay, so again, I'm going to say Phase 1 and 2 is really foundational. That's what we have to do. We have to make sure that every household that needs access to internet, needs a device in hand, is able to get that. But as you think forward, as technologists love to do, we have to think about what's in the future, because what we do today may not necessarily be sustainable. So I talked about sustainability and how we're going to continue providing service, but also want to talk about some of the path forward with respect to innovation. So workforce preparedness. And so it's one thing to say, okay, so you're going to get off of Access Charlotte, you're going to have your own device, and you can pay $35 a month, but how do we sustain that, right? And so part of that is through training. And so here we talk about technology-focused certification programs, but we're also looking at training and certification in general. So part of what we are thinking about is how do we provide training to our residents using various mechanisms to bring it to their fingertips. So learn to earn. And learn to earn concept is, hey, I'm a resident and I would love to have a device, an iPad. or a tablet, but I want to earn that. And I'm going to earn that through taking certification training. And so we're looking at partnering with an LMS, a learning management type of platform that will allow our resident to take certification courses, get that under their belt, and by doing that, they can earn a device. And so it's not a give me, it's a I'm going to do something and earn that. So that's the one piece. The other piece is a universal application. So let's think about how we navigate, right? So our residents, and we've heard residents come to council during public forum, talk about the services they need. And so we're thinking, how do we find a way to bring that closer to them? And so we're having conversations with the county, we're having conversations with some of our local partners to really say, how do we either develop an app, develop a web portal, develop something that our residents can put in the requisite information, and by virtue of them doing that, it gives them access to some of these services. So I say, think of Pepper Tree in a box, right? So Pepper Tree, we're looking at building, creating this environment where a resident can go to Pepper Tree and have access to all the services. And we're saying, if I can't get there, is there another way to get access to those services? So there's a lot of work to be done behind that, but this is conceptually what we'd like to accomplish. And in talking with the county last week, they have similar ideas, so I think we're going to be able to bring those together. And lastly, support the future in terms of, you know, whether it's 5G, whether it's a ubiquitous network, and I know this is a tech term, but it's really all about how do we ensure that as we move and navigate throughout Charlotte, that we can have service that we need. And then collaboration on how do we just intertwine technology to be able to accomplish some of our needs, whether it's think about, so we talk about autonomous vehicles, but think about food deserts. How do we get groceries there? Can we get groceries delivered? And do we need to have a driver? Can we do autonomous vehicle? We have to think about technology for not just today, which we are covering, but also technology for the future, which is what we're talking about here. And this council has allocated of the $10 million, $2.5 million towards the future connected Charlotte. And so what you asked me to do is build the foundation, which we have done, but we wanted to earmark a portion of the dollars to come back to you with a plan on the future connected Charlotte. And that is still what we have to do. This is just sharing with you the concept to get agreement on the concept so we can take that forward. Questions? I know that was a lot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not a question, a statement. Congratulations. This is a truly wonderful, not only presentation, but the work that you and the team have done on this is definitely going to be impactful throughout the city and a lot of our neighborhoods. I'm hoping that in this conversation that there is intentional direction to work with the district representatives, because they're the ones that's on the ground every day and know some of the areas and some of the pockets within the districts that also may need assistance. But I wanted to just, well, not even but, because but negates everything. And reiterating, thank you for the wonderful work.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Driggs?
Yes, thank you. As we seek to expand the access, are we mindful of the fact that there's a lot of mischief that goes on the internet? And are we taking care to protect minors who might gain access because of our activity from, you know, miscreants or going to bad places?
I think that's a great question. So the devices that CMS are distributing to the children are those that are configured so that they cannot access anything inappropriate. So by law, they have to make sure those devices are set up in that way. Now, the devices that are distributed to the adults don't have those restrictions on there, only the ones that are distributed to the youth. However, part of our conversation through leveraging digital navigators, boots on the ground, is to talk about internet safety and what to do and what not to do, to make sure our residents are aware of that. Great question.
I can warn you, my teenage son was able to crack those safeguards in a matter of minutes. But
Okay, I think that your son would not appreciate that comment, Mr. Driggs.
sorry, I shut him
So
down
I
again.
think
No
we
harm
should
done.
worry more about the scams that go on with our elderly, like, what are we trying to get done here and not being able to do that. Ms. Molina.
Renee?
I'm laughing. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm laughing at Councilmember Driggs because we actually talked about that. We were talking about, constraints on our young people. Because as a mom, I have two. And I have one in middle and a ninth grader. And so, and I'm not concerned. First of all, let me say congratulations. I echo my council member colleague in saying I'm really happy to see this. I know that we have so much need throughout our communities, and the beginning of being able to be your own advocate is having access. And this is the ground level of what access looks like. And I know we have varying degrees of what access looks like, so this isn't to, omit anyone else's need or to say that we won't in time get to what those needs are. But we do have community members that we have to bring along. And so in order for them to be able to, get in the game, they got to have a vehicle to which they access, at minimum, the internet and be able to afford it and have those tools to provide for their families. So I'm actually pretty excited to see how quickly this was turned around. And you guys actually have a rebuttal for that concern that was raised. So congratulations to you and your team. I look forward to working with you. Y'all know I love District 5. I'm gonna be saying that all day, East Charlotte, but of course I'm here for the whole group because, we're not just East Charlotte, we vote on everything, right? So everything that comes across the desks, we all make decisions around them. So I'm sent here by the people of East Charlotte to speak for them. So of course, that's where my passion lies. But, total side note to my colleague over there, and just to echo that CMS sentiment, the computers that CMS does provide, I know for sure they have administrative access because I used to get upset about the fact that like my kid can like try to play a Roblox game or something like that on there. But the teachers actually, and the administrators do have administrative controls of that. But as parents, of course, if we're talking about a minor, there are other constraints that we could use. But we laughed about that together because kids are so in it. Maybe we'll get some geniuses out of this, right? Like we'll find some like kids with like some, undisclosed talents that they could do like Councilmember Driggs' son and like figure out some coding to, and then we're looking at like the next child with some, tech savvy, great ideas. So congratulations again to you and your team.
Well, I kind of agree with you. When my son was younger and he was tinkering with computers and playing games, and I was telling him he was frying his brain with those games, and then he ends up studying technology, and I'm like, okay, so Mom, you should have just laid off. But, so you just never know where it lands. But yes, I agree that if they can hack into the computer, that's one, that gives you an inkling of what they're good at.
Right.
But the other thing is, yeah, they're not supposed to do that.
And actually this weekend, Councilmember Bakari, I went to the convention center this weekend, and they had this e-games convention. It opened my eyes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I had no idea the sport that is gaming. I have, and I know he can speak to it much better than I can, but I mean, look, he's over there, he's just smiling. He's like, but this is kind of a, an add-on to that too, because there were so many bright young, kids in there, and you could see like they had just this passion for technology that, it's just waiting to be enveloped, with the opportunity to kind of be and go in the STEM track. So we had a lot of discussions. I met a lot of cool people. I ran and bumped into a lot of young people with a lot of great talent. So, I'm not the technologically, advanced or savvy human, but I'm open to learn. I have a certification data analytics, but I don't even pretend to be that smart about it. But, we got a lot of great potential kind of orbiting this too. So I'm just really excited. I'm going to stop now. Okay, done. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so no further questions. Again, congratulations. The effort is really moving forward, and it is an important one as we think about how we're going to grow and how we work with our kids to make sure that they understand the future. So with that, I think that ends our action review items, and now we'll go into a closed session, and I'm going to ask the city attorney to read the motion for the closed session.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The motion is to go into closed session pursuant to GS 143-318-11A3 to consult with the city attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the city council, and pursuant to GS 143-318-11A4 to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other business in the city of Charlotte, including potential economic development incentives that may be offered in negotiations.
All right, do I have a motion to approve this motion on closed session? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're good. Any opposed? All right, so if we can have the space, Jenny. Thank you for joining us for the Charlotte February 27th City Council meeting. We're really glad that you've chosen to join us, either in person or if you're watching us on the city's Facebook page or live streaming or streaming from our channel. I want to begin our business meeting with introductions, and we'll start with our city clerk.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, District 4.
Good evening, Lawana Mayfield, Council at Large.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Malcolm Broome, District 2.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Tara Bakari, 6.
Good evening, Dante Anderson, District 1.
Good evening, Victoria Watlington, District 3.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
All right. I want you to know that we begin our meeting with an invocation that we use to solemnize our relationships and conversations during this meeting. We know that there are various ways that people celebrate their religious faith in our community, and so what we'd like to do is recognize that please feel free to participate, or if you choose not to, please feel free to do that as well. Tonight, we will begin with our invocation by Councilmember Watlington, and then we will follow with a Pledge of Allegiance immediately thereafter. Ms. Watlington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. On this second to last day of Black History Month 2023, I offer a brief quote by our former president, or our forever president, of the United States, Mr. Barack Obama, that I think sums up our ongoing charge, even as we leave February and go into the rest of the year. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. So I can ask you to bow your heads real briefly if you so choose. Lord, may we...
Let's stand for our Pledge of Allegiance.
Put that on a t-shirt.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I want to acknowledge that we have two of our council members that are not with us tonight. Councilmember James Mitchell is not available, but we also want to recognize that Councilmember Dimple Ajmira had a baby on February the 20th. The baby's name is Arya Ajmira. I always forget it's colored husband by beads, so sorry guys, you just have to go with me on that. Both mom and the baby are doing well, so with that, it's always nice to have a new Charlottean join us. And so with that, we are going to begin our meeting with our public forum that we schedule on a regular basis. Our public forum allows you to come and address the council members if you have signed up to speak in the forum, I think with the city clerk, and I've got a list so far here, and if I hope you'll help me. If I mispronounce your name, know that it's from the head, not the heart. And I would also like to say that as a result of you coming down to speak, there will be a report that will be generated that you will receive a copy of in response to your report. We know that you're coming to give us information, and often what we need to do is to take the time to really make sure that we give you an adequate response. And so that's what we try to do, and the manager's team will be able to get that back to you if we're able to do that as quickly as possible, Mr. Jones. All right, so our first speaker tonight is Dominique Harris. Mr. Harris? And our second speaker is Cass Otley. So Ms. Otley? If you come down, then we can have you on each side. Each person will have 3 minutes to address the council. Mr. Harris, good to see you.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Good.
All right, my time start?
You have 3 minutes.
All right. So I'd like to just say hey to everybody. Hope y'all doing good tonight. And I'm really here just to remind y'all that city workers are still supporting this city and still showing up for work every day. We didn't stop during the pandemic. We didn't stop during inflation. We're not going to stop now. I'm going to show up at work come this Wednesday, even though it's my day off, because y'all got some training that y'all want us to do. So I don't mind doing my job, and I don't mind coming in for overtime. But it comes a point when people have to come in for overtime, And when people have to pick up a second job, and when people have to do extra things beyond their scope of work to make it, that it becomes an issue. Now, I know last year we made some great strides in the right direction. I hope we can keep making those strides. Working with Marcus Jones, city manager, has been a great thing. I think that's one of the best things that happened to this city, because he really came in and really does look out for us. He looks us in the eyes, tells us straight. He's a straight shooter. I got to give him that. He's a straight shooter. He's not going to cupcake or put sugar on top of nothing. But as long as we keep that good relationship with him, as long as we keep moving in the right direction, I know the city workers will be able to wake up one day on a 40-hour paycheck and say, yeah, this is enough for me to make it. So.
Thank you very much. Ms. Otley? Ms. Otley?
I'm sorry, I'm choking a little bit. Good evening, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about the city workers. I want to echo what Mr. Harris had to say about working with the city manager, Marcus Jones. I think it is great that the city workers' voices are being heard and their concerns are being heard. But we also have to pay attention to what's going on with inflation in the city. A lot of the city workers are renters. The rent has increased in Charlotte 11.5% over the last 12 months. Normally, rent increases anywhere from $30 to $80, each year. Lately, rent has been going up anywhere from $200 to $400. We have folks that can't afford to live in the city still. And while we appreciate the minimum wage being lifted up to $20 an hour, people still have to make $26 an hour to be able to live in the city. And we just want you to be mindful of that the workers are dedicated and they are coming into work, but they are struggling. And so we want you to think about that when you think about the budget, the fact that they are dedicated, that they keep the city clean, they keep the city working, they keep the city running, and we need to really put forward to help them be able to live and thrive in the city so they don't have to work 3 and 4 jobs, and so they could be home with their children and be able to come to meetings like this. A lot of times the workers can't even attend city council because they're on call. We've had where they've been here in the building and have been called away to go back to work. So we just want you to be mindful of that and to keep the communication open. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speakers are Justin Bell and Ms. Anike. Ms. Anike? Mr. Bell? Is Mr. Bell in? I'm looking at speeding.
You must have an update.
I don't see him. I maybe don't have the latest one. Thank you very much. Ms. Amike, or Mr. Amike? Mayor Swallow? Mayor Swallow? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your time. My name's Mayor Swallow, and I'm here to request that the city add a left turn signal on Hawthorne Avenue on the north and southbound sides on either side of Central Avenue. Now, my request has been seen by the DOT, and they've already contacted me. Yay. However, I think it's important to tell my story so you know why this is important. On the morning of January 24th, 8:50 a.m., I headed to work like I always do, north on Hawthorne, get to Central, where there is no left turn signal, get out in the intersection, wait for the light to turn red, and turn left. And that's what I did, and then another car coming from the other side of Central drove right into me. Now, happily, no one was seriously injured, but I hate to think about what might have happened had it been worse. The person who hit me had a 5-year-old child in the car. And again, there is no left turn signal on either side of Hawthorne at Central there. Now, I want to give a shout out to Police Lieutenant Officer Cavanis. He happened to be in the area, saw the 2 cars in the middle of the intersection, brought his car over and blocked traffic and got us safely to another parking lot where we could then talk to the responding officer who took our reports. Now, In what I'm sure was an attempt to make me feel better, the responding officer said to me, "Don't worry, this happens every day in Charlotte, especially at this intersection." Right? So then I said to him, if you know this happens all the time, why don't they do something? I have a friend who's lived here her whole life, and I saw her that weekend. She doesn't know where I work. She doesn't know where my office is located. I hadn't talked to her all week. And when I saw her that weekend, I said, "I had an accident this week going to work." And before I could continue, she said, "Was it at Hawthorne and Central? Because that is the worst intersection." I said, "Yeah." Now, Charlotte's population is growing. I see these ginormous apartment buildings everywhere, but I do not see the same scale of measures being taken for public safety. Because of that, and because there was this accident that could have been worse than it was, I do request that the City of Charlotte please add a left turn signal to that intersection on either side of Hawthorne, going north and south on either side of Central Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Michael Lucas. Mr. Lucas? Mr. Lucas? All right. We also would have Kimberly Helms. Ms. Helms?
Good evening.
Ms. Helms, thank you.
Hi. Mayor and City Council, I wanted to talk to you about the voter disenfranchisement in the ETJ zone with regard to rezoning decisions. I'm here again speaking for people who purposely chose to live outside the city limits, people who were seeking the American dream of a house, a yard with the kids to play in, away from a busy street, where they can grow a vegetable garden, entertain friends, or just relax in the privacy of their own space. Those of us in the ETJ zone can only vote for the county commission. 212,703 people as of 2018 population members in Mecklenburg County cannot vote for the city council. But the city council has included our rural areas in their 2040 plan, something that was a surprise to almost every resident I speak to. They proudly state, "At least we're not in the city." Little do many of them know that the city land grab is just waiting for someone to want to build 170 townhomes in a 35-acre home site with other large parcels of land around it on a 2-lane country road. The ETJ designation is based on your ability to annex us. The rules have changed and you can no longer annex us, so why do you still have the ability to grant rezoning petitions in areas where you were not elected? I'm sure you have a loophole somewhere that grants a semblance of legality to this. When you converse with people regarding the city allowing industrial sites next to neighborhoods, adding more traffic than roads can handle, ruining the quiet standard of living where in some cases generations of families have worked to earn the quality of life they have, all without being elected by the people whose property values and standard of living is being adversely impacted, all they say is, "That's not right, that's voter disenfranchisement, that can't be legal." As Justice Potter Stewart once said, "I know it when I see it." This same topic is popping up in other states. Generational wealth is being taken away. Standard of living is being downgraded, all for the sake of more taxes in the city coffers and without the consent of the people being affected. I've mentioned this before in emails. You won't see a lot of us here. We don't come to the city after work, and you don't represent us. So I'm just coming here on behalf of the thousands of people who bought into something that's being taken away from them. Just let you know that we really wish you would take into consideration the people who have worked hard, gotten the what thing. I mean, my home comes from generations that were able to buy one house, build another one, build a house. I wouldn't have that if my mother and my grandmother had not helped take care of the house that we had in Westerly Hills that burned down. So I'm just saying I have so many neighbors saying that if the city gets us, if we get annexed, I'm moving. And I don't want our neighborhood to be like that. We already have enough problem with the rezoning and the things that are trying to go on around us. We just want people to understand that the American dream is for everyone. I'm in a very diverse neighborhood, very diverse. So.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mary Gray. Ms. Gray is going to be us. Microphone? Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah, it's on.
We're going to get the microphone to her. Thank you, Ms. Gray. They're going to get it over here for you. Okay.
We don't have a mic on this side?
We do not have a
You're welcome, Ms. Gray. That's fine.
Bend my knees a little bit.
All righty.
I don't want to go too far. Just there we go. Thank you. Yes. This is partly public transit. I don't know. I'm having trouble with the cab companies, particularly Yellow Cab. They've got the biggest fleet, and if other cab companies don't have a car, they always say call Yellow Cab. My troubles with Yellow began back in 2021. I would call for a cab that say such and such cab is on the way, and then such and such cab never showed up. So I'd call follow-up, said, well, can you dispatch another cab? I need to go. One time, several times they kept me waiting up to 2 hours. Then in the late spring of 2021, I had stopped at a restaurant to get something to eat and called a cab to complete my trip back to where I needed to go. I called at about 7:30, 8:15. They said they would put the dispatch out right away. An hour went by and no cab had come, so I called again. Anyway, I ended up calling several times. No cab ever came until 5 o'clock the next morning. Now, in the meantime, the restaurant had closed, and lest I be caught by the restaurant for second-degree trespass, being on their property when they were closed. You know, there's big rules about not being on their property when they're closed. I had to sit out on the sidewalk all night. Just malicious mischief type stuff, but actually causing a lot of trouble with the things I had to do and the people I'd make promises that I'd be there. Okay. Then that went on off and on all of 2021. Then in December of 2021, midway through December 2021 to midway through February 2022, I was at a rehab center getting physical rehabilitation. I wanted to go to the library to start looking for an apartment or someplace where I could live, because I decided I didn't want to go back to my other state to live. I wanted to stay here. So I'd go to the library, plus I did some other research on the library, at the library. I'd call for cabs to the library, and they would take me there. Then when I called for a cab home at about close to 8 o'clock when they closed, the cab came, but he would I guess he thought I was totally unfamiliar with Charlotte, and that he would take advantage of a little old lady at a rehab center, and he'd go the long way around. Okay, take me 3 miles out of my way, when he could have gone a much shorter route. Okay, so he overcharged me. Then he got mad that I only left him a smaller tip, but I'd known he'd gone the wrong way, charged up, what was it, $2.50 a mile, another $7.50 that I didn't need to pay, so I lowered the tip. That was just my way of trying to even think out. They would always take me the long way around. One cab went 4 or 5 miles out of the way.
Ms. Gray, thank you for sharing that with us.
No, but wait a minute, ma'am, also. So I paid cab drivers more than I would like you to, so the cab company won't pick me up. One driver in 2022 said I did not pay him. The bill was $16.50. I came up with 14 in bills, and then I got out my coin purse, which was full of coins, and he would not take them for the extra $2.50 to pay my bill.
Ms. Gray,
so now they blocked me.
Ms. Gray, we're going to have someone hear more about your work with the work that you haven't been able to get done with the cab company. And so, Ms. Askew.
But I depend on cabs because I'm handicapped, and the bus system I cannot use the bus system for a lot.
And we may have some other options for you as well. We have a special transportation service.
I called the DSS transport. They didn't show up for my doctor's appointment.
Well, we will try to figure out what's standing
But
in
the
the
cab
way.
company says they won't take me because I owe that driver $16.50. But I told them I paid him the money.
Thank you very much, Ms. Askew. Thank you very much, Ms. Askew. Thank you. I know you've been, I bet that change purse of yours is really full. Okay, Miss, I think that is the, okay, thank you. I think that is, do we have any other speakers, Madam Clerk? So this is the end of our public forum. The other speakers, we do have other speakers that are signed up to speak to specific topics that we are discussing for a decision on our agenda. So with that, now we are going to move to item number 7 on our agenda. It's a public hearing and a decision on Avery Place area voluntary annexation. Are there any speakers for this public
Only if
hearing?
there are questions. Mr. Call is here if there are questions.
All right, if there are questions on this item, so do we have a motion to open, we have a motion to open the public hearing, and we don't have any speakers. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. All in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. The next item is a public hearing for the Evolve North Lake Area Voluntary Annexation. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers?
Only if there are questions, Mayor.
If there are questions. So do we have a motion, do we have a motion to close the public hearing and approve the Evolve North Lake Area Voluntary Annexation?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. I failed to read the section on the item number 7 that said that we were approving Avery Place voluntary annexation. If you would just be kind enough to raise your hands as in favor, including that in the motion and your approval, that would be great. Thank you very much. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, the next item is the public hearing for Mallard Wood Phase 4 Area Voluntary Annexation. Do we have any speakers? All right. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing and approve the Mallard Wood Phase 4 Area Voluntary Annexation?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. The next item is item number 10. It's a public hearing on a resolution to close unopened right-of-way between 828 and 900 Matheson Avenue. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, ma'am.
We have speakers. And that is
Mr.
Heron Realty and Associates. Mr. Heron? Mr. Heron, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Edith Heron. George Heron is my husband. And the reason we're here, we're native Charlottesans, and we want to thank y'all for giving us an opportunity to speak. We're here because we have requested that you to close that area between 900 and 828 Matheson. And the reason being is that we're planning to just build a home. We already own a piece of property there, and we're planning to build another home there, and just wanted to make sure that it was in process. We paid all the dues that we needed to pay, or the fees, and just wanted to know a timetable, or if it was going to be approved, or what we need to do next.
All right, so we have a planning staff that helps in this area to make sure that you have the correct zoning and all of those things, but we also will have, you will have a lot of complicated processes with building permits and things like that. So if we start with this one, which is your ability to have the closing of it, if the council approves that today, then I think the next step would be to begin a conversation with planning and to make sure that you've got the appropriate rezoning, if that's sufficient for you.
Yes. Well, what I want to say that we own the property 900 Matheson and 828 Matheson. back in 1988. And we still on 828. And we was able to, while we were there, we used to have the drain clean, where the water comes from the back end. We used to cut overgrown brush. We put gravel in the area so that we wouldn't be in the mud. My family, well, I have 2 daughters. In fact, they was raised in 900 Matheson, and we still own 828.
Okay, so I'm going to put you in touch with Debbie Smith. She is actually the person that does all of our right-of-way in this area, and Ms. Smith is right there, and she will be immediately available and accessible for you to discuss this.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Move to approve.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. All right, that's unanimous. So those are the public hearings that we have. The next item on our agenda is item 11. It's the city manager's report.
So thank you, Mayor and members of council. I just have 2 items tonight. One, I believe you have in front of you your 30-day memo, and next Monday will be our committee day as normal, but then a few days later, we'll have our second budget workshop. And the items would be the revenue update and economic forecast, operational staffing, compensation and healthcare, our financial partners, and our municipal service districts, as well as a water and stormwater budget outlook. So we'll have a action-packed day on the 9th. And then on the 13th, we come back with our CATS review status update. We have talked a bit about that in the past. And then some good news that relates to a Safe Charlotte update. The 20th would be the zoning meeting, and to wrap out to the end of the month will be the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference, which is March 26th through 28th. And then, Mayor, lastly, a lot of times we talk about budget, or we talk about public safety, and it was great to have many of our operational folks in the chamber tonight, but we typically do not talk about finance enough. And I don't think I see Teresa Smith, their CFO, but I would like to tell you that the city recently won the Triple Crown as it relates to finance. Okay, what do I mean by that? So we were awarded from GFOA, the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. We also typically win the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. Congratulations, Ryan, and your team. But for the first time, we also won the Popular Annual Financial Reporting Award, or the PAFR. And basically what it does is it takes a 250-page document that talks about the city's finances and reduces it to a little pamphlet that's easily understandable by the general public. It's a pretty good summary. So it's the first time that the city's been able to win all 3 awards. So I'm very appreciative of both our CFO, Teresa Smith, Ryan Bergman, and also communications, Jason Snyder, to put this all together. So congratulations, guys.
Council member got a copy of the small report, and it was enclosed with the financial document, which is like, maybe 2 inches thick, guys. So the pamphlet is very easy to understand and read. So hope everybody gets a chance to pull it out again. Anything else, Mr. Jones?
That's it.
All right, so we'll go to the next item on our agenda, which is the Arts and Culture Policy Framework. We have this report that has come from an ad hoc committee of the council, and so I believe we've had some discussions around it, and I'm going to recognize Councilmember Driggs, or Graham? Councilmember Graham, and let me go ahead and get the motion on the floor. And is there a motion to approve the Arts and Culture Policy Framework to support and sustain a vibrant arts and culture sector that is essential to a healthy community in Charlotte's future economic and social development? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
And there's a second. And now I'm going to recognize Councilmember Graham to speak to the item, and then we will call upon our speakers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to take the opportunity to thank my colleagues, Councilmember Driggs, as well as the Mayor Pro Tem, for the last couple of months, the three of us have been working on the request to create a framework for council discussion making as it relates to the Arts and Science Council, Arts and Culture, rather, I'm sorry. Also, over the weekend, we sent out a memo to the City Council which addressed where we are and the 7 key points. Again, I just want to recognize both the Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Drake for the work they've done in getting us to this point, and want to open it up to Councilmember Drake and Councilmember Winston for any comments they want to make.
Thank you. I'll offer just a little bit of background. I think people are generally aware that some time ago we reached a point where private funding that the Arts and Science Council was able to raise had dried up pretty much, and the city recognized that there was a need for us to step up and to provide more public funding for the arts, which we did through the Infusion Plan, a cooperation with private funders that provided $12 million a year for investment in the arts, equally from the private sector and from the city, so a total of $36 million. We also decided to basically commission an arts and culture plan. So this was to be a clear statement of what our goals and priorities were. And because of the fact that so much of the funding now was coming from the public sector, it was decided that we would not continue the relationship that we had had with the Arts and Science Council in its old form, in its prior form, that we were going to take a new look at what our priorities were, what the uses were of the public funds, and then what the terms would be of a continuing relationship with the Arts and Science Council. So we started down a path where we hired a consultant to help our arts director, I forget what her title is, coordinator, in the preparation of a plan, and they worked in turn with a board of creatives. And the goal of the council was to not involve itself in decision-making about which organizations would receive grants, but to let this board of creative people talk about where they thought the greatest effectiveness was and what was in the interest of the community. At the same time, we did feel that we ought to have at least a statement by the council of some of our priorities, or some of the things that we intended with this funding of the arts, particularly to avoid a situation where we received the final draft of the Arts and Culture Plan and then discovered that maybe there were members of council who didn't agree with some of it. So our idea was to get out into the open what the expectations were of the council and make them available to the people working on that report. You may be aware that we have had a report already about the state of arts and culture in Charlotte, which is kind of an inventory of existing institutions and the capacities that we have now. That will serve as a reference for the formulation of the Arts and Culture Plan. Otherwise, as I say, the goal was to leave a lot of the design of the plan to creatives and not to impose the will of council on that, which could be political and certainly would be coming from people who don't have a personal role, a personal presence in the arts market. So what we're looking at tonight is the result of, in fact, a couple of years of work on this subject that included a couple of rounds of conversations with council members from the prior council and this one. Also included a lot of community outreach on the part of the consultants to try to get input from beyond just that board to establish what sort of things we would want to see in a policy document that specified what we wanted and did not overly prescribe to the creatives who were involved in this what this plan should look like. We then recently, as Mr. Graham alluded to, 3 of us on council undertook the process of yet another round of conversations with our colleagues, and then tried to kind of distill down everything that we had seen in the consultant's report, what we had heard from the group, the board, and the steering committee who were working on this question, and distill that into a statement that council could then vote on, and with which we would sort of hand it over to the people developing the Arts and Culture Plan in the hopes of having a harmonious and speedy adoption of that plan when it finally comes back to us as a final draft. So there are 7 key provisions in the plan, and my phone is just blanked on me, just one sec. I can tell you that, for one, thank you. Yeah, good, that's more legible. One thing that was clear to us was we wanted to ensure that there was funding for the legacy big venues that the city owns. And so one of our goals was, we did, for one, state our intention to provide public funding for the arts. So let me say that up front. Our goal is to continue funding. We can't fully commit to that because we can't bind future councils to anything, but this council is saying it is our intention to continue to provide substantial arts funding going forward. And the second point then is that some of that money will be used to ensure that there is no danger of bankruptcy to any of these larger organizations that operate within facilities that we own. I can see the feedback already. However, the goal was to have a sufficient amount of money, privately and publicly, also to ensure that there was availability for other goals that we had, which included equity, diversity, and a vibrant arts community. And a lot of how we actually pursued that was going to be left to the creatives. And we were just going to tell them, these are the things that we're looking for. We want Charlotte to be a vibrant community. We want the arts community to help us with our economic development and tourism goals so that we will have some return to the business of the city, as well as a human return in terms of an adequately funded arts community. And bear in mind, we were providing before $3.5 million to the Arts and Science Council every year for a long time. We are now talking about an amount that's considerably more than double that, without being specific about that. So we also intend to talk to private funders and continue to encourage them to partner with us. We had, for that 3-year period, we had a matching investment from them of $12 million a year for 3 years. When the infusion fund ends, which was that interim partnership we established with them, those particular terms will lapse. And so what we're contemplating here is an ongoing conversation with private funders to encourage them to invest in the arts, to sponsor events, and to engage actively. And we have had encouraging remarks from many representatives of that sector that they do have a level of interest in doing that. We want to look around also for other funding sources, other government sources, partners that can work with us to increase the amount above what we are able to commit. And we will take a role in trying to advance that, trying to make sure that there is abundant funding for the arts and that it comes from as many sources as possible. Concerning the Arts and Science Council in particular, our intention is that they would continue to do the public art management that they do now, and that they would be among the grant-making entities, one of several grant-making entities that will decide, and that would come out of the plan. The plan would then suggest who the grant-making entities are, what the basis would be for choosing them. The Arts and Science Council is in that mix, and to the extent that money is allocated to them for making grants, they would receive the same fee that other organizations receive for their service in making those grants, for processing those grants and making them. A clearly controversial point that I'm sure is on your mind is, because of this new framework and the way we're going about this, the old situation where the city provided recently $900,000, $950,000 a year of operating support is replaced by what I just described. So the Arts and Science Council will do the public art. They will receive a percentage of whatever grants they make based on the decisions of the board and of the culture plan. But the idea is to free up some of that money for allocation to artists and not to have a large sum like that tied up with the administrative costs of an arts organization. And I think those are the key points. Mr. Chair, is there anything that you think I've left out there? So what we say in our proposal here is the framework above provides a lens for council to evaluate recommendations from the Charlotte Arts and Culture Plan. It does not preclude recommendations for the plan from being adopted or enacted by the city. So this is a step in a process. Again, it attempts to address a couple of the major issues around the arts that we have grappled with for a couple of years, and it intends to remove council from the further process of deciding what the future will be for arts in Charlotte.
All right, thank you for that summary. We are now going to have two speakers come down at a time. We've got two podiums. Susan Patterson, followed by Jasmine Hines. Following Ms. Patterson and Ms. Hines will be Dr. Woods and Patsy Burtkins. I know the steps are a long way down. So, is Ms. Hines here? Jasmine Hines? All right, Dr. Woods, would you like to follow Ms. Patterson? All right. Okay. Ms. Patterson.
Thank you. Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, I appreciate your time and attention tonight. I'm Susan Patterson. I'm a board member and former board chair of the Arts and Science Council, and I'm here to speak on the value of the Arts and Science Council to our community. You know, ASC is not, as the policy framework suggests, just a grant-making organization. Yes, we make lots of grants. We have the expertise and long years of experience in creating fair processes to ensure that individual artists and organizations of all sizes have an opportunity to receive dollars. But critically, ASC is more than that. ASC is our community's designated arts agency. That means it is our job to help the arts community thrive here. It is our job to ensure that there really is culture for all in this community. It is ASC's job to be a resource hub for individual artists and organizations and to advocate for the whole sector. It is ASC's job to lead on equity in the sector, which we have been doing for nobly the last few years. Also, I want to remind you that ASC actually represents you, represents all of us on the state, regional, and national arts stage. That's what arts councils do. And in fact, as was referenced earlier, until the Infusion Fund was created, the Arts and Science Council was the mechanism for us to raise private dollars in support of the arts and culture sector. The agency that you're proposing to significantly defund by cutting operating dollars does all of this with a full-time staff of only 11 people. So I have to ask, why would you not fund the only agency that exists to support our arts and culture sector? The one agency with the history, infrastructure, and legacy of support for the sector, and the leading agency for investing in individual artists. And why now? The decision is puzzling to me, the timing of it. There is only 1 year left of the Infusion Fund. We do not yet know what the new Arts and Culture Plan will recommend, nor...
Thank you so much. 3 minutes, and so now we'll let Dr. Woods.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'm here tonight as a member of the Infusion Advisory Board appointed by this body with the task to stabilize funding for arts and culture after the 2008 economic collapse and a significant drop in workplace giving. The Advisory Infusion Fund Board has worked with dollars that have been provided from both the public and private sector, and the board has worked to approve grant funding for arts and culture across the sector with the intent to do no harm. The board was also tasked with working with a consultant to establish a cultural arts plan that would provide a blueprint for the city's art and cultural support moving forward, because the current commitment to arts and cultural funding ends in 2024. The board has just finished the State of the Arts and Culture in Charlotte with broad community participation and is now moving forward to develop the cultural plan. However, before the plan could begin, the actions of this council to remove an option for funding arts by eliminating Arts and Science Council for any future funding except managing public art has brought into question our time, our sacrifice, and the expense of taxpayers' dollars. One of the things that makes Charlotte a great city is its level of civic engagement from a broad constituency groups, businesses, faith communities, community advocates, and private citizens who lend their voice to the public square to help shape the best possible public policies that work for the good and the advancement of all. To change how the Advisory Fusion Board works and the freedom of the cultural plan to offer the best possible option after hearing from diverse voices wounds this city's tradition of bringing all and brings into question volunteer service now to any board, committee, or commission. If they might not experience similar actions, sets a dangerous precedent and may say to the citizens, we are no longer interested in what you think if it is not what we want in advance. I humbly ask that this council reconsider its position of removing ASC from future funding of the Infusion Fund and allow the process to play out until we have a cultural arts plan presented to the council. At that time, it would be appropriate for the council to make a decision, but not now.
I know that everyone could be applauded because you're making really heartfelt remarks. So we're going to go ahead and move to Ms. Patsy Burkins and Caroline Colucci, followed by Arsena Todd and Ann Lambert. Please, go ahead and...
Good evening. My name is Patsy Burkins, and I am Executive Director of Charlotte Community Services Association, a 20-year-old nonprofit based in the Family Life Center of First Baptist West. We currently provide an academic and fine arts after-school and summer program for nearly 100 at-risk students in grades K through 9. Our students take brass, piano, art, violin, ballet, and music appreciation classes. We also offer the lyrical pre-K program, also with an academic and fine arts focus, and our Silver Hub Day Party featuring music, movement, and health and community information for seniors. Our partners include Arts Plus and the Charlotte Symphony. And for about 10 years, we received an ASC community grant. I say all of that to note that we are well acquainted with Charlotte's arts community, and that's why I come before you regarding the proposed arts and culture policy framework. First, I ask that you keep in mind that ASC has evolved into the leading supporter of grassroots artists. We have been introduced to new groups that we never would have known about if they had not had ASC support. At a time when governments and businesses have publicly touted their commitment to equity and support of organizations led by people of color, I urge you to maintain that commitment for Charlotte area grassroots artists. Second, I ask that the city maintain its current funding of $800,000 for the third year of ASC infusion funding. To deny funding to, quote, support the operations of grant-making bodies when it is not clear what the administrative fees will be is premature. Yes, the city is taking an active role in funding the arts, but that's a relatively recent development, and the efficiency and history of ASC needs to be supported rather than essentially devalued and deconstructed. In summary, I ask that the new Arts and Culture Policy Framework first keep in mind the stellar work that ASC has been doing in encouraging new and non-traditional artists to join the community collective and promote equity in the fine arts. Second, maintain third-year infusion funding for ASC's general operations to support its infrastructure. That's best practice. And finally, please do no harm to an agency that has served this community for years. Thank you.
Please.
Hi, good evening, y'all. I am Caroline Kalouche. I am a native Gastonian and Charlotte, pretty much. I have the Caroline Kalouche Company, Charlotte Circuit and Dance Center, and also representing the Dance Artists Alliance, CLT, which is Charlotte's first dance council. Like everybody has already said, this was a shock to many of the dance artists and circus artists in the Charlotte community, and we really would like just to push pause on that clause to defund the Arts and Science Council and let the Arts Advisory Council and Cultural Plan do their job so we can see a full plan in place. Thank you, Dr. Woods, for all your great words up there, and Ms. Patterson. The Arts and Science Council is more than a granting operation mechanism here in Charlotte. They have offered so much support and resources towards us, and just as a grassroots person of 16 years doing art in Charlotte, we needed it. We need their help. We need their guidance, and that, please just don't take that away from them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Arsena Todd and Ann Lambert. All right, Justin Hicks. Ms. Todd.
Good evening. My name is Arsena Todd, and I'm a local music artist and owner of Dear Soul Music Co. I started this initiative in 2017 to provide resources and development for fellow music artists. Over the past few years, this initiative has received funding that has helped us activate over 1,000 aspiring and emerging artists through free workshops for adults, youth camps for kids, as well as through our community showcases that empower Charlotte residents with a platform and resources to create sustainably. This is something that I'd never be able to do without the ASC staff member that personally contacted me to meet with them in the community and encouraged me to apply for this funding that's allowed me to provide these resources sustainably. You see, this is part of the work that ASC does. They provide an infrastructure and expertise on investing in an inclusive and equitable way. One of the key tenets of the city's Art and Culture Advisory Board is to do no harm. When considering that the Infusion Fund is entering its last year and the focus of the fund has been to provide stability to the cultural sector, why would City Council even consider cutting operating costs and support for the local arts agency? ASC is more than a grant-making organization. They're community organizers and activists. The proposed Arts and Cultural Council policy framework being entertained really doesn't acknowledge ASC's vast role beyond grant-making. Who will support the broader arts and culture sector that impacts residents and creative individuals like myself that intend to organize impactfully for the community, if not ASC? Defunding the city's operational support of ASC when they have already been severely impacted by the continued decline in unrestricted revenue to support this sector is harmful. I ask that you amend this specific section in the proposed framework and consider the individual creatives and smaller organizations like Dear Soul Music Co. that will get lost in the mix by cutting out this necessary organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hicks, followed by Mr. Valka.
Ann Lambert.
Oh, where's Ann?
Right in front of you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello.
Thank
My
you.
name is Ann
Sorry.
Lambert, and I'm a theater producer and an artist here in Charlotte. I support the ASC and do not want to see it defunded. I have been a working professional theater artist in this community since 1998. I founded 2 theater companies, and since 2020, I have been activating a 55-seat black box theater space inside the VAPA Center. There are several VAPA Center artists here tonight. Everybody say hi. There are over 300 badged artists occupying the VAPA Center at this time. Grants from the Arts and Science Council helped me to produce several theatrical productions and to pay my actors, designers, and artists as professionals. Grants from the ASC helped me to purchase theatrical lights and curtains for the COB venue at VAPA Center, making it a more professional and appealing space in which to rehearse and perform. Grants from the ASC endorsed me as a professional working artist in Charlotte and empowered homegrown professional theater in our community. I want the ASC to continue to be a viable granting organization in our community because their mission includes funding small, grassroots, innovative, independent artists like me who often do not have access to other funding available to larger, more established arts organizations. And that's very important in this year when we've lost the Actors Theater of Charlotte. I've been following the decisions the city has made to carve back funding from the ASC and to create the Arts and Culture Board for the distribution of these funds that were previously administered by the ASC very closely. While we're in the middle of the development of a cultural plan to ensure the equitable and appropriate distribution of these funds, as well as ways to ensure that all artists are represented equally and appropriately, and not just white-led, male-led establishment art forms and art groups that do not foster community and prioritize representation, why is there a need to further gut support for the Arts and Science Council? The city should wait to take any action until the cultural plan that you commissioned is developed, approved, and implemented. Please do not vote to remove administrative and operating funding from the Arts and Science Council at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lambert. Mr. Hicks.
Good evening. I want to thank the City Council for allowing me to speak. My name is Justin Hicks. I have lived in Charlotte for almost 7 years now. I'm a visual artist, art curator, and film producer, currently working with Black-owned and family-led production agency Lloyd Visuals. I was an Opportunity Fund recipient and a current member of the Blumenthal Fellows Class of 2022, and have had the privilege to work on several projects of impact within the City of Charlotte. From curating at the Met Museum to leading a historical exhibition for the Charlotte International Arts Festival, I take great pride and joy in engaging with the community as a creative. I have many organizations to thank in all of these endeavors, one of them in particular being the Arts and Science Council for ensuring the success to many of my projects at the local level. Through ASC support, I have not only been able to amplify my own creative practice, but to provide opportunities and collaborate with other like minds. My hope as this policy framework comes into fruition is that the Arts and Culture Board would see value in ASC's impact. The Arts and Science Council has been a cornerstone to ensuring equity and opportunity for local artists, not solely through grant making, but through intentional community programming as well. A prime example of the versatility was through the Balancing Act program last year that hosted many emerging local artists in the city, where we learned about understanding our value in the marketplace and developing a strong business acumen across various mediums. Charlotte is an ever-growing city with a creative economy that is still very much a blank canvas. It is only through intentional collaboration and uplifting organizations that are actively doing the work to support the broader arts and culture sector that will ensure greater equity and opportunity for the arts and culture of the city as a whole. I believe ASC is one of the organizations that should not be overlooked or taken for granted in this decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vodka?
A couple of years ago, the Arts and Science Council was justifiably held accountable for their inequitable granting practices. Since then, they have worked hard to change their policies, and thankfully, a great deal of their funding is now supporting emerging creators, especially those of color. Sadly, their change in priorities did not sit well with the larger arts organizations and their grass-tops connections, leading them to lobby the Charlotte City Council to take the funding from ASC and move it elsewhere. Even sadder, the Charlotte City Council buckled under the pressure, and instead of improving matters, you decided to double down on what ASC was being accused of and take away its funding in order to create a new entity that is run and controlled by larger, well-funded organizations and their corporate partners and interests. As an emerging creator of color with roots in the immigrant community, I am here to speak on behalf of emerging creatives living in Charlotte. I am thankful for the great strides ASC has made to embrace equity and ensure that people like me can get funding we need to grow and thrive. With the support of funding from ASC, my hope this year is to finally follow my dreams and take the plunge to open a new small business centered on my social justice photography and the love for community. Through art, I hope to give a voice to those that have felt oppressed. As an emerging creator and part of a smaller art collective that recently achieved 501c status, I ask you to please not make the same mistake you previously made. Please increase funding for the Arts and Science Council under your funding priorities. Please support organizations that have an organization that has wholeheartedly embraced equity in our community in a manner that is enriching our city and growing opportunities for groups and people that don't have the same resources and grass-tops connections as bigger arts organizations. Please do what you did not have the courage to do back then. Side with small businesses, nonprofit organizations, our community, and the working families you represent. As someone who has worked with Arts and Science Council grant review boards, I've seen firsthand how ASC takes a democratic and community-based approach to making decisions. Please keep the decision on how arts and funding is allocated in the hands of artists and the community and the organizations who support us, instead of in the hands of grass-tops entities and their corporate interests. The City Council has made many bad decisions that affect the economic health and well-being of our working communities, especially BIPOC communities. And the soul of Charlotte are in your hands and the decisions you make. Make the right decision. Increase funding for ASC. And I would hope that a city council, mostly consisting of people of color, would make the right decision that helps our communities rather than continue to hurt our communities.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the community for coming down and speaking, and thank you to the ASC for doing your job and organizing on behalf of your interests. You know, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I, like many of you, have worked, still work, feed my family as a creative or working in the creative sector. That's why I was one of the people that has been trying for since I got on this council to prioritize the arts and culture community and investment from the city. A lot of people in our community think about arts and culture as something that is a nice to have for wealthy people, so that they can, I don't know, go and see the ballet or go to the symphony when they want and on their spare time, that many working people, many people who have, been left out, don't have the opportunity to do. I know that's not true. When you think of arts and culture, when you know about arts and culture, you're talking about jobs. You're talking about small businesses. You're talking about the hundreds of stagehands, carpenters, techs, caterers, truck drivers, warehouse workers that go and support those many different productions behind the scenes that folks never see. So when this actually got on the agenda several years ago, and it was just some of the big organizations telling us why we should do the same things over and over again, I raised hell. I raised hell and said, no, we are going to do something different, that we can do something more. And that is what we are about to do. I grew up, right, doing community theater in Davidson, working on shows. I still do. Sometimes I leave council and go work on shows that the ASC supports, but there is much, much more that we can and need to do. What we are talking about is finding ways to support more people like you and organizations like you that, unfortunately, in this community, there has been a ceiling. There has been, there is not enough, has not been historically enough resources invested in it, and it needs to be more than the Arts and Science Council. I've been pretty agnostic to the organization itself, because what we are talking about is much bigger than any one organization. It is bigger than grant making. It is understanding, learning from an institution what these sectors are, who these workers are, and how do we invest in the community so that there are more opportunities and options for people all across the 310 square miles of our city, and work with our partners in the county and around the region. Part of the reason why those grants have been still being made is because we prioritize folks like you, and have said that folks like you are going to continue to have options and opportunities. In fact, we are going to put more money in the system so you can have more options and opportunities, and more people can come to the table. This has not been something that has just been decided and that is snuck up on the Arts and Science Council. The Arts and Science Council has not originally created to be dependent on public funding. This was supported primarily by private funding, like it was said. But when that dried up, public dollars stepped in during a crisis. A crisis can't extend for multiple decades without the folks at the wheel making adjustments to change. And that's the situation that the Arts and Science Council finds itself in. Again, I've been agnostic, so how do we actually end up getting here? Well, we have been engaging with the entire community as a whole, but make no mistake, this is City Council's policy guidance. This is what the 11 of us have come up with, following the data, having conversations amongst each other, because the way the staff needs to operate, they need to understand what council's priorities are so they can make funding recommendations and programmatic recommendations from a policy perspective during a budget cycle and moving forward. So we followed that, as my colleague said, during the fall. The three of us engaged everybody on this council, and multiple times we had conversations, we had interviews, and all of that data was, and we had many public engagement over the past 3 years to figure out what is the guidance that this council can come up with. So what you see on the paper is the collaboration of all 11 of us. Now, this item, because we've been trying to interact so much with our colleagues, was put on our retreat agenda at the end of January, so that we can have a conversation, further conversation about what we have been hearing from the entire group, and to be able to guide and change it if that was deemed to be necessary. Our colleagues very clearly at that dais said, we are good, we've done enough work with this, We want you guys to take everything that we've been talking to you about, go and put together something so that we can pass it. That's what we have done. This is City Council's document that is informed by the community data and by collaboratively working together, and will further support the arts and culture community from the grassroots to the grass tops. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Driggs, followed by Ms. Anderson.
I think it's only fair to be clear that we're not necessarily unanimous about this. So we've all participated, and I understand. Okay, we'll find out what the mix of opinion is tonight. I just hope in this conversation that you won't lose sight of the fact we went from $3.4 million a year of public money that we distributed through the Arts and Science Council to a total of 12. The arts community has a lot of reason to celebrate this escalation of support compared to what was there before. So then the question is it about the arts or is it about the Arts and Science Council? From an arts standpoint, I just can't imagine that the arts community would be better off if we had carried on with our $3.4 million as we were doing, and there hadn't been this big commitment that was also made by the private sector. I do also want to mention that what we're talking about here does not preclude grants to any creative who is receiving support from the Arts and Science Council now. In fact, I think in the coming year, we will probably see pretty much a continuation of what is in place. So nobody is being shut out as a result of this. I think if you look around this dais, you will recognize that all of us, and I include myself, are very sensitive to the equity question and to the need to ensure that some of the money that we're talking about is available. So when we talked about wanting to make sure that there was adequate funding for those facilities, it was in conjunction with a commitment that we would have enough money in excess of that to address a lot of the things that you're talking about. Nor have we put a cap or any sort of a prior decision on what amount of grant making the Arts and Science Council might do in order to maintain its relationship, say, with the grassroots people and stuff. It could easily come out of this that money from this larger source is allocated to the Arts and Science Council in order to maintain relationship it has, particularly with the grassroots and a lot of the entities that might not have registered with the steering committee and the other work. So I think that for the arts, the fact that the council is making this much larger commitment than we had made prior to this process is a win. I think the commitment of the private sector is a win, and we have worked out as best we could the arrangement for the Arts and Science Council that resulted in the greatest availability of money for the arts community as a whole. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I want to say thank you all for being here and being active participants of the arts community. I'm very passionate about the arts community. I support the arts community every turn that I get. I have degrees myself within the arts, so I understand where your thoughts and your passions are rooted in. I also know it's very difficult when you have to make change and pivot to something that might feel like, there's friction, but may open up opportunity for more equitable approachability to the arts for artists, but also for the audience that receive the arts and that are impacted very deeply by what they're receiving. As I have liaised with several of my council members, we have discussed this, and we've discussed how can we open up a wider aperture for artists such as yourself and art receivers to have a better relationship, a bigger relationship that's rooted in an equitable framework. And I do believe that as we move forward from an ASC perspective, there's an opportunity to capture more dollars than what they have historically captured, but then also an opportunity for more individual artists who have diverse backgrounds to be able to tap into dollars that will fund their gift to this community and to this city. So I just want to acknowledge your presence, your work. It doesn't go unseen. I am right there with you. And I do believe that as we move forward, there will be additional opportunity for artists such as yourself to grow, live, and thrive in the city of Charlotte. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
May I ask a question to Dr. Woods? Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Can I?
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. I just wanted to ask, we've received numerous emails on this subject, and some of the emails reference specific language in our proposal. There's a sentence that they're proposing that we remove. Are you familiar with that? The last sentence that says, "This grant making will be accompanied by an admin fee in line with those payable to other grant-making organizations, and the city does not intend to support operations of grant-making bodies."
Yes, and if I may respond, our board met on Tuesday, and what we're hearing tonight is completely different from what we heard in that meeting. I got an email Thursday telling me that everything had changed as a board member to a board that this body appointed. That I have served on multiple boards in the 28 years that I've been in this community, and never have I had an experience such as this, where in the middle of our work, we're receiving instructions on a different framework. I think it does this council damage. I think it does our community damage. And it threatens our ability to continue to keep people civically engaged in meaningful and peaceful ways.
So, Mayor, I think that it would be, just my opinion, I think we should defer this vote. If there is some misunderstanding or change, or if there's an opportunity for more negotiation or more civil discussion, or more, just more opportunity, I vote that I'd like to make a motion to defer this discussion and allow the community more time to work with the city and come up with another option. Okay, then I'd like
So
to
we
make that
have-
as a substitute. If there's a motion on the table, I'd like to make
There's
that
a motion on the table.
a substitute
so
motion.
We have a substitute motion to defer the item for further engagement with the community. And I think Ms. Mayfield seconded that motion. All right, so our practice would be to discuss the motion, not the first motion. So
Thank you, Dr. Wood.
comments on the substitute motion, discussion, Mr. Driggs?
I would just say it's taken us several years to reach this point. I think we've explored this. I will say it was not the intention of the plan that somebody who is chosen to make grants cannot also be eligible for a grant based on its own artistic activity. So it's not an either-or. The thing is that the specific situation where we were providing substantial funding to an organization that wasn't itself a creative or responsible for the art itself. So I don't believe that should be a sticking point, but otherwise I would just say it really has been a long time, and every one of us has had all kinds of opportunities to weigh in. We circulated a draft of this document days in advance, and therefore I don't know what will be gained. There was a huge amount of outreach on the part of the consultants during the development process. So personally, I don't see what we gain by spending more time on this. Thank you.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So for full transparency, when I was serving on council previously, I was also on the board, the Arts and Science Council Board as a mayor appointee. So I was there when we had multiple discussions regarding a lot of opportunities back then and how Arts and Science Council showed up in community, especially in communities of color. The challenge I have during this time that I have been away is hearing, honestly, for me, the first time tonight, that there was a community group that was also engaged, because I knew of the group that was created to help get us to this point, and I actually attended a number of those community conversations. I did not know that there was a separate community appointed group and that we had representation and that you had a meeting and then language that you were under the impression that will be moving forward is a little different than the language that we are now seeing. That is where I have a challenge. I feel like I had some information. I had some knowledge. Again, I attended, I believe, at least 3 of the community conversations that was leading up to this. But according to the emails, and I don't know what conversations happened within the last 3 years, because I would assume that the executive director of Arts and Science Council was in direct communication with not only city staff, but also council members during this time, as a group was identified to go out and have multiple community conversations, or at least a representative from the Arts and Science Council would be in direct communication with the individual or group that is out having conversations with different artists. I do not have any information to say yes or no that did or did not happen. I am not here to point any fingers. What I am questioning right now is, based on information that is shared tonight, I have concern, which is why I second my colleague's motion to defer for us to get a little bit more information. My biggest concern is, as we are trying to have community engagement, as we are going to be identifying appointments tonight for any boards, commissions, any community outreach, if we set a precedent, which is not a new precedent because it has happened for many years during the lifespan of our city, where community is engaged, they give 6 months, 18 months, 24 months of their time and energy to show up to be a part of conversations, but then when we are in the process to vote, that language is not reflective of the joint conversations. That is what I have a concern with. So to hear information tonight that we're not being as inclusive, but again, full transparency, I attended personally at least 3, if not more than 3 meetings regarding the conversations that led up to this. I was a little surprised regarding that one sentence and how that will move forward. And Councilmember Driggs, you are correct. Information went out. I will be fully transparent. I did not read it last week because I called myself going to get a freaking job. So therefore, in between the time of doing all of that, I started reading everything late last night and earlier today. So I was surprised to see that. I am glad that you all showed up. It is going to have to be a decision that council makes, but I want there to be more so a conversation of how we interact with our community when we're asking them to be of service and to show up and give their time and their talent to be a part of conversations, if then that conversation doesn't feel like it's encompassing them. So I did want to share, yes, I was there at the very beginning when we had conversations, and yes, I am back at the end of some of the conversations. So there was some conversations that happened in the middle that I was not a part of. I will own that I will try my best to do a better job moving forward to try to keep up with everything that's going on. But for right now, my biggest concern is that if we had you engaged and you gave us hours of your time and your talent, and now what we're hearing, even that one sentence, if that breaks down the communication of more than 18 months, that is where I have a concern. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Watlington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief. By and large, the proposed framework here, I think, is palatable. I think that a lot of those around the dais can get behind a lot of the things. I think it comes down to this one particular line. Not so much that, well, I'll speak for myself. Even in listening to the conversation, it seems that it's being interpreted in particular different ways. I think it would be beneficial to really understand before and after. I think ultimately what everybody wants here is for our creative community to get the best that they can get out of our investment. And so with that lens, I think about one of the conversations that I've had with ASC and this concern that the glide path is not super clear, that we're in the middle of this work, and whatever the outcome is at the end of the work, it sounds like there is not a desire to make that change right in the middle of it. We would rather finish the work and then see what the outcome is. And I'm fine with that. And if someone was to ask me exactly how that glide path worked right now, I couldn't answer that, and that would make me uncomfortable with going forward at this moment. So I support a deferral simply to shore up that information so that all the parties involved can understand what does this look like, regardless of what the outcome ends up being at the conclusion of the 3 years.
All right.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes. Ms. Molina?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually,
Discuss this at the retreat. It really would have been.
First of all, I echo my colleagues. Thank you all for coming. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room. And it goes without saying that these are really tough decisions to have to make. I am the type of servant, because a lot of the times when we sit in these seats, we're often dehumanized. You do this, you are a bad person, and then we then in turn have to humanize the people who are pointing those fingers as if we're not human sitting at the dais. And so I want to make sure that you understand that, a lot of us are absolutely connected to the community. I think just last week I did an Afro-Latino celebration with 2 people who are sitting right here. And they had an hour-and-a-half conversation with me about what this funding means to them once we finished up. And so I remember even working during the pandemic where I didn't even make $20 an hour, and I'm a single mother with 2 children, to help others find funding for the pandemic, but those funds ran out. And so our communities were forced to look for new resources to meet their needs. And a lot of the times these are really hard choices to make from a policy position. So although I sat at the dais tonight, confounded to almost the end, I can see the merits in taking a little bit more time to make sure that we have, an understanding on both parts. Because what I don't want to walk away from this doing, no matter what decision we have to make eventually, because again, the framework of how we do business from a policy perspective, we have to honor that. But maybe, like my colleague, Councilmember Anderson was saying, maybe there are avenues that we can make sure that our artists are taken care of. And maybe it's not through that grant making, but maybe it's something that's a little bit more strategic so that, our artists and the community don't suffer directly from any changes that we need to make as a policy, but, a policy-making body. So, we all hear you, no matter where we sit on this decision. We see you. We have artists on the council. My only clarifying question to us is, if we defer, are we deferring to a when? I mean, what does that mean? Do we turn around in a month and come back? I mean, what would that mean, I guess, is what I'm trying to get out of this.
I think that's a great question, because I heard 3 different things about what rationale for deferral. So one was to shore up the path, Ms. Watlington said, for the ASC. So we defer until that path was clear. The second one was, Councilmember Mayfield said, address the language and the awareness of that language and test it with the community of people that have been working on this. And then I think Ms. Johnson said more engagement. So there were multiple reasons for this, and I think we probably need to settle on one. The motion was made by Ms. Johnson first, so to defer, the substitute motion was defer, and I think that Ms. Johnson, engagement, to answer Ms. Molina's question, how long, what's your vision of the engagement?
My vision of engagement is that we don't have a member of the public who stands in front of us and says they feel, what's the word? Deceived, I guess. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I could not hear you.
They feel deceived. And that's concerning. That's concerning to me and to all of us. So that's the first step, that we have engagement from the artists and from the stakeholders, so that they feel this is a fair process, that we're working together. Yeah, I mean, this Dr. Woods stood in front of us, and we all saw the passion. And he's engaged, he was a part of the board, and he's informed. And if he feels like that, then we need to listen. So whatever that looks like from a city perspective, we need to make sure that they're clear on our direction, that there's no surprises, and that represents this council the way we want to be represented.
Somebody's got to say that. You have to say it.
Madam Mayor, if I may. So I want to make sure that I ask that question to clarify, because I don't want to sound like I'm guaranteeing that we're changing what the policy framework looks like. I want to make sure that I clarify that if we, sit in this body and we decide that there's going to be more time, my hope is that there is additional communication where everyone knows where we stand and why, and that we still attempt to put in the mechanisms that will protect our artists in the community. Because again, we are a governing body and we make policies. And so the grant-making piece, we really have to be strategic in that and how we partner with institutions, because we love to partner. We partner all the time with private entities to, expand our reach and make more capacity for a framework that is then translated to our communities. Dream Key Partners, I mean, I can name a whole list of, organizations that we partner with very regularly so that we can, co-create sound initiatives so that we can disseminate, funds and opportunities to the community. So I don't want to, display or make it seem as though there is a guarantee of change, but I, hope that with more time, if that's the will of the body, that we have a formulated discussion around, making sure that everyone understands and seeing what we can do, if at all, and things of that nature. So I wanted to say that, for clarity.
All right. I want to just acknowledge that in this discussion, I want to be very careful and not characterize the work of the Infusion Committee that Dr. Woods was on, that it was deceitful. I'm always very careful about that. So Dr. Woods, I hope you'll allow me a little bit of grace to say that you were a member of a committee and perhaps it didn't go the way that you would have, but I'm not so sure that when the writing of this was done, that the language was appropriately translated, and I'm not sure that I get, but I don't think that there was deceit in people's intentions, because that group worked really hard to get this done. So I just want to be to that position to say that. I think that, no, I can't, I'm sorry, but I just, we have to be careful about our words like that, and I just want to make sure, because he was a member of the committee for that time. Okay, so we have a motion to defer for additional, I would say, the shoring, is that correct? Shoring up the
Yes.
path for the ASC.
Just to make the glide path clear for everybody,
Okay.
so folks, I have no doubt that it's in the plan, but just to make it clear that this is how we're going to move from the level of funding we are to our future state, and this is the timeline, because I think that's the main thing that gives me pause, is that it sounds like there was a disconnect in understanding when is this going to happen versus when the work was going to be complete. So if we could just shore that up from a scheduling standpoint, I think that will make it clear for folks.
So do we have the schedule for that? I thought it was in the information that the plan would be done by, I'm sorry, can someone help me? I'm not as well versed in all of this, so either, Priya, could you come up and explain to us what the runway or the shoring up of the path would be, runway path, whatever, hiking or flying?
Hello. Yes, thank you. So the timeline for completion of the plan, which is being guided by the community steering group, of which the advisory board is the core. That timeline is, we are aiming to have a draft plan in May that we will test with the public. So it'll be another opportunity for public input. And then our goal is to then finalize the plan in June with the public feedback on that draft plan. Does that answer the question?
Ms. Watlington, is that sufficient?
So it'll become clear then by June how this ramp up, or ramp down rather, in funding is going to impact.
So that's the timeline for the completion of the arts and culture plan. I want to just clarify that that's the plan, whereas I think part of maybe a question that I'm hearing is about a pathway that relates to this policy framework, which is separate from the plan.
Okay.
So do you have a pathway for this policy framework?
I do not, because this is a council-led activity.
I understand that. I just wanted to make sure. So the plan is our determination.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so we have a motion on the floor for deferral.
Until the next business meeting. We can defer it until the next business meeting.
next meeting.
No,
Maybe they won't show up.
is that enough time?
I'm not quite sure.
I don't think that. You don't
This
think
is
that's
barely for real.
I'm not quite sure that would be enough time for
I don't think so.
additional.
All right, well, then we don't give a date. We
I
just.
think, Ms. Mayfield?
Madam Mayor, actually, this is a question for the manager, thinking about what Ms. Priya just shared. Right now, we're talking about the framework. Tonight, the individuals that are here, from what I've heard, the concern is specifically in one bullet in the framework. What is going to be presented to us in May and June are actual recommendations. So for this framework discussion, does it need to align with the conversation of the report out for May, June? Or do we need this framework language solidified now and then get a report out if what we're hearing, just for clarity, does this framework need to move forward in order for us to get to May, June?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So Priya, don't go too far away, okay? So I think there's another issue out there tonight that hasn't been discussed, and that is how the infusion funds are dispersed for the last year of this 3-year period. And at some point, the Arts and Culture Advisory Board that the public sector and the private sector came together to appoint, they need to make decisions about the allocations. So I'm not trying to relive last July, but one of the sticking points was that there was the belief that the policy of the council or the framework of the council may not have been followed with the distribution of the funds. So this is so important because when it comes time for the different groups to receive funding, we don't want to relive what we lived through last year. So whatever this decision is by the council is extremely important as we move forward with funding.
Can I ask another
Ms.
question?
Johnson, yes, another question?
Yeah, let me ask a question. The biggest thing is, Dr. Wood said up until, I think, Tuesday, they were under the impression that something else was being presented. So there was a miscommunication or something happened that they did not, or I guess not everyone felt like they knew what was being presented. What happened there? Was there a last minute
Talk to their
change?
co-chairs.
Huh?
You gotta talk to their co-chairs of that committee.
So I
Okay,
think,
well, no,
wait, let me try this. I think that there, as the manager said, there needs to be some council definition to move forward.
So I'm getting-
And this is the framework,
Right.
and that framework, I think, was not necessarily discussed by the Citizens Committee, because you will have an additional opportunity for engagement, as Priya said, and then you'll come back with the plan. So if it's June, and, I'm sorry, June was for the plan, and May was for the draft, and the draft would then have more public discussion. So it does, I understand how that could happen.
Okay, so then we defer for sure until there's a meeting to
I think that
communicate with that group. that was
I want to
not
go back and let the manager repeat what he said. The council needs to provide some guidance.
Sure. So I'm not 100% sure, it's good to see Dr. Woods. I'm not 100% sure Tuesday versus Thursday or later in the week, but what I can tell you is the agenda didn't go out until the latter part of the week. So there was nothing to discuss because we hadn't decided that what was going to be the language that would be on the RCA tonight. So whatever that timing was, the agenda went out later in the week, and I believe that there was a discussion after the agenda went out about what was on this RCA.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to defer. And so why don't we go ahead and take a vote on that motion, the substitute motion, and we'll see where we land. And so all in favor of the substitute motion to defer, and we'll have some idea, the manager will have to work through that. I'm not quite sure what that means exactly, but for deferral. So all in favor of deferral, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The motion does not pass. All right, then that takes us back to the original motion, which is adoption of the arts and cultural framework. All in favor of adoption of the framework as presented in item 12, approving that framework to support and sustain and a vibrant arts, and then also knowing that, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good job. Cannot believe that just passed.
I think that, again, thank you for being here and the work that continues to be done. And so we'll continue to have that participation. All right? All right, the next item on our agenda is item 13. Do I have a motion to adopt a budget ordinance appropriating $513,000 in private development funds for infrastructure improvements to general capital improvement projects from developer EBA Crystal Real Estate and Phillips Place owner? We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no who seconded the motion? Mr. Mayfield, I believe.
No,
Who made the motion?
I did.
Second.
All right, Ed seconded. Thank you very much. And so with that, all in favor, raise your hands.
I did have a question.
All right, do you have a question for that one?
Yes.
Yes.
I sent it to Ms. Harris earlier. Is she?
I'm sorry. Did we have that before you?
She said that we would go over that then.
I'm sorry, what was your question, Ms. Johnson?
I had asked about the funding source to improve the state-owned
Oh,
roads.
yes, that came
Right.
out. Did you get your
I
copy?
did, yeah.
Okay.
But when I saw her, she said that she would talk. I thought she said she would talk about it during the meeting, but that's okay. My question was about the ability to improve other state-owned roads, i.e. Mallard Creek or roads in District 4. So I did see the answer
I've got it right here, but if you rather have Debbie come down, Debbie Smith come
Yes,
down and
please.
address that, would that be easier?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Smith?
14 comes out of storm.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Ms. Johnson, I believe that you would like to speak to that on item number 14. Is that correct?
Yes.
Item number 14, great. I will be happy to be available for item
Okay,
number
okay.
14.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
All right. So don't go anywhere. We're moving on now. We're not slowing down now. So we have item 13, a motion and a second.
Okay.
All in favor, please raise your hands. All in favor?
13.
13. The developer funds for traffic and all of that stuff. Anyone opposed? All right, let's go to item 14, the municipal agreement for railroad widening project from I-485 Outer Loop to Williams Pond Lane. For item 14, is there a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute a municipal agreement with I-485 Express Lane bonus allocation funds in the amount of $6.6 million for railroad widening? Adopt the budget ordinance, and item B, adopt a budget ordinance appropriating said funds from the NCDOT to the General Capital Projects Fund. Do I have a motion?
I need to filibuster for a minute.
So moved.
As Mr. Driggs asked me to delay if 14 got up here, I don't know. I literally don't know what I'm supposed to do right now.
That was not it. I can tell you, you had one job, and that was not it.
Is that not it? What am I supposed to do?
I think that
One of them was like, don't let them vote on 14.
We have a motion.
And I was like,
We have a motion and a second.
How am I supposed to do that?
All right, we have a motion and a second. I withdraw my
I'm about to give one of those Lawana speeches.
Oh, my gosh, please. All right.
Four score.
I know we've had a long night, guys.
I withdraw my question, Mayor.
I know. Ms. Smith, would you please address the question that Ms. Johnson requested?
I withdraw my question.
Ms. Smith, please.
All right.
Come back.
Mayor saved you, okay?
The level that you owe me.
I guess I'm sorry. You
I cannot emphasize how much you owe me right now, Mr. Driggs.
All right. So,
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. So excited to be back up here to answer the question. I believe, Ms. Johnson, you had a two-part question. The first part was just regarding the bonus allocation funding. Okay. And the bonus allocation funding is awarded to counties that do implement the high occupancy managed lane projects. And so with that, the decision-making around that is awarded to the CRTPO, so Charlotte Regional Transportation Organization, and they select those projects based on a competitive process. So those bonus allocation funds have been allocated to 4 projects, one of which is this railroad project, which you're voting on tonight. The second is also on your agenda for tonight, number 15, which is the W.T. Harris Street Lighting Project. We've got 2 others, McKee-Weddington, and then Graylock Ridge, which is in Matthews. And then I believe the second part of your question, Ms. Johnson, was related to additional state funding and prioritization around that. And what I wanted to share with you tonight is that with the State Transportation Improvement Program, also known as the STIP, they've recently, NCDOT, completed 2.5 miles on Mallard Creek Road, and that was from Sugar Creek to W.T. Harris. So also prioritized on Mallard Creek Road, we have 2 projects. So that would be Mallard Creek Church Road from to I-485. So that's one. And that is currently scheduled for construction in 2025. And the second Mallard Creek Road project is I-485 to Concord Mills Boulevard, and that's currently scheduled for construction in 2028. And I believe we provided to you a map that gave a listing of all of the other projects that have been prioritized for the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation projects. And we'd be happy to provide that to you in a list form, but I believe what we gave you was a link to the map.
Oh, that would be awesome. Thank you. You know,
Yes, ma'am.
I've brought up a lot of concerns about Mallard Creek and the infrastructure, so that would be awesome
Right.
to see. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we have a motion for the municipal agreement for the railroad widening project, item 14. Do we have any other discussion? Hearing no other discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. All right, that's unanimous. The next item is item 15, a municipal agreement for W.T. Harris Overhead Street Lighting Project. Adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a municipal agreement with NCDOT for bonus allocation funds in the amount of $998,000 for the overhead street lighting project, and adopt a budget, item B, adopt the budget ordinance appropriating said funds.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, discussion, yes.
I have a question. I wanted to, just to share the details with the public, if you will. The street lighting on W.T. Harris. Can you tell me where that will be, please? Or how far that street lighting will be?
Absolutely, Ms. Johnson. Happy to share that information. So that project will provide street lighting on W.T. Harris for a distance of approximately 8 miles, and that will be from Harris, so it'll be Harris from Mount Holly Huntersville Road to the I-85 North Bridge. So that is a distance of about 8 miles for that street lighting project.
Congratulations. I know. And when will that start?
Yeah, so we are currently anticipating construction to begin at the end of 2023.
2023.
Yes, ma'am.
I am so happy to hear that. Thank you. Can I hug the city manager?
I just want you to sit it down WT Harris a little bit more. Come on down, WT Harris.
Person over here.
Yeah.
I think you want to talk to him.
And Councilmember Graham, I'm sure he was very, this is great news, isn't it?
Very
Lighting
good
on
news.
On WT Harris is
Yes,
so
move to make it happen, and let's go to the next one.
All right, the next item on our, I'm sorry, all in favor, please raise your hands. All in favor, that's unanimous as well. The next item is item 16, is there a motion to adopt a budget ordinance appropriating $3.9 million from the Emergency Rental Assistance Program provided by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 to the American Rescue Plan Act Fund, and authorize the manager to, or his designee, to negotiate and execute this document.
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of this motion, please raise your hands. All right, thank you very much. The next item is item number 17. Is there a motion to authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a non-binding memorandum of understanding for the redevelopment of the Charlotte Transportation Center project with master developer WPTP Brevard Holdings, LLC, and item B, approve the use of public funding, including the City of Charlotte's Capital Investment Fund, tax increment grant, certificate of participation, land value, and raise grant dollars as a source of funding to be negotiated in the memorandum of understanding.
So move.
We
Second.
have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. That makes it unanimous and a half, or animous and half, or something. It's unanimous. All right, so now we'll go to the portion of the agenda for nominations, and I'm going to turn this over to the clerk. The City Council will consider nominations for various boards and commissions. The council members submitted their nominations earlier to the clerk via email. Names of nominees will not be read at the dais. Tomorrow, the clerk will email the council the names of applicants that received at least 2 nominations. They will be considered for appointment at the next business meeting. Any applicant receiving 6 or more nominations can be considered for appointment tonight upon a motion, second, and a majority vote of council. The names of all nominees will be recorded in the official minutes. And so the clerk will now proceed with announcing the results of the nominations.
Yes, Mayor and Council, there are numerous boards that individuals receive 6 or more votes. So at the conclusion, if you would make a motion to appoint these individuals to these positions, then they won't have to come back to you at the next meeting. For the Arts and Culture Advisory Board, Alvin C. Jacobs Jr. received 6 nominations. For the Business Advisory Committee, For the recommendation by the Metrolina Minority Contractors, Melody Compton received 10 nominations. Also for the Business Advisory Committee, the following individuals received more than 6 votes. This is for a partial term. Christopher D. Berry received 9 nominations, as did Daniel Friel. He received 6 nominations. The Bicycle Advisory Committee will come back to you at the next business meeting. For the Charlotte Business Inclusion Advisory Committee, for the recommendation by the Carolinas Association of General Contractors, Sharon Walters, the incumbent, received 10 nominations. For the one appointment for a 2-year term, that will come back to you. That's an at-large position. It will come back to you at the next business meeting. For the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Public Access Corporation, Laura Joyner received 10 nominations, and Tyler Lovelace received 9 nominations. For the Community Relations Committee, the following individuals received nominations. Stephen Blackburn received 9 nominations. Sidhar Dasari received 9. Alexandra DeJerns received 9. Allison Franz received 9. Quentin Graves received 9, as did Matthew Roden, received 9 nominations. For the Historic District Commission, Brett Taylor received 10 nominations. For the Historic Landmarks Commission, Joshua Shope received 10 nominations. For the Keep Charlotte Beautiful Committee, Sharita Coleman received 10 nominations, as did Michael David Davis. For the Neighborhood Matching Grants Fund, Anthony Chadwick and Kimberly Savage each received 10 nominations. For the business representative, a partial term for that committee, and for a neighborhood representative for a partial term ending in 2024, Susanna Jerez received 10 nominations, and Jeffrey Simpson received 10. And finally, for the Transit Services Advisory Committee, the incumbent Antoinette Love received 10 nominations, and Robert Moran received 8, and that's for the Local Express Service Passenger category. And a motion and a second and vote, it would be in order.
Before I ask for a motion, Madam Clerk and Mr. Attorney, it doesn't make a difference, I guess. I noticed that there were only 9 people in the quorum and 10 nominations. Does that make?
Mr. Mitchell, I think, submitted some of his nominations because he was going to be absent, which is allowed.
Copy. Thank you.
I would like to make a motion to appoint all those with 6 or more votes that were just listed by the clerk.
I would like to second that motion.
Motion and a second.
That's how a motion's made, right there.
Any discussion of the motion?
No.
We don't.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Seeing none, that's unanimous. Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. So moved.
I move that we adjourn.
Braxton, you have to ask questions and confuse the whole issue.
All in favor, adjourn, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Good night, everybody.
Guys.